You're a mean one, Miss Chase. A Percabeth Christmas Alternate Universe Fanfiction. Part 1. Percy Jackson believed that there was one superior holiday, and that was Christmas. Christmas was the best. He may be a 23-year-old man living in his own apartment, but it didn't mean like he couldn't act like a kid on Christmas morning every day of December. "Morning," Percy chirped happily to one of his next-door neighbors. To say the least, Percy was very close with everyone on his apartment floor. He had 4 neighbors. Well, 5, but they had just moved in, so he had never met them. Jason and Piper were a couple living across the hall from him. Grover was to his right, and Leo was to his left. The new neighbor lived by Piper and Jason, where Thalia used to live. "Morning," Piper replied, all bundled up and ready to leave the complex. He had had an all-night shift, caring for sea animals, and had the next couple of days off, much to his delight. Percy gleefully whistled to his door. It was decked out in wreaths, garland, and tinsel. He smiled at that. It was festive, and 'tis the season. He looked at Grover's door, covered with wrapping paper of all shades of green. Leo had meme Santas all over his door and a small green mistletoe-like plant hanging over his door. It wasn't actually mistletoe, though, if you looked close enough. It just looked close enough that if you weren't a plant lover, then you'd have no choice but give him a kiss. After all, that was the reason Leo had it hanging, as a sad but hilarious attempt to get a kiss from a pretty girl, but not get roped into it by a friend. Piper and Jason had a traditional "Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays" sign on their door, as well as LED snowflake lights that were hot glued on. Definitely Piper's idea. Jason was a simple, casual man, and Piper was the most extra human being Percy had ever met besides himself and his mother. However, when Percy's eyes landed on Thalia's old apartment door, he frowned deeply, an expression that never loomed on his face during the holidays. The door was no different from how it was in the springtime. Dark brown wood with small imperfections, stains, and scrapes. There were no lights, no stickers, no wreaths, or anything. It was plain as ever, and it looked boring and quite sad. Percy wondered if, maybe they hadn't gotten the decorating your door for Christmas memo. Most floors didn't actually do this fun thing. Perhaps they were swamped and hadn't had the time to do so. It was early in the month. Most companies were pushing the workload before break. Decidedly, Percy changed his course and knocked on the plain door. There was a long pause before the sound of the door unlocking was heard, and suddenly the door was wide open to reveal a curly and blonde-haired woman. She was rather tall, not much more than Percy himself, though, who was, 6'1", but she was pretty close to eye level, so say a couple inches off of him. Her hair was thrown up into a ponytail. However, it was practically falling over her neck and shoulders in a haphazard way. Her expression was stony, tired bags under her eyes, which were a color he couldn't quite discern. Even with a disheveled appearance, Percy's brain was hit with one singular thought of, "Oh my God, this woman is so beautiful." Percy had never been the type of person to be shell-shocked by appearances, but he was frozen by his new neighbor. "Can I help you?" she said with a sigh. Percy opened his mouth to reply, but it felt dry. The woman raised her eyebrows at him. "Look," she said tiredly, "I have a lot of work to do, so if you don't mind, and if you don't need anything, I need to get back to it," she said, closing the door. "Wait!" Percy's voice worked again, and he held the door barely open. The woman huffed and let go of the doorknob from the other side. "Do you know what you need now?" she asked impatiently. Percy nodded. Yeah. Why isn't your door decorated? He asked. I mean, if you're busy, and you seem to be, I can help you. It'll take less time with 2 people, Percy offered. She squinted at him. I'm sorry, what now? She said dryly. Percy motioned to the other doors. I wasn't sure if you got the memo or not, but, we decorate our doors for the holidays. It's just a fun, festive thing we do. Christmas spirit and all, Percy explained to her with a bright smile. She looked at him blankly. Yeah, sorry, I don't do Christmas. And then the door was just slammed closed before Percy could even get another word out. Did she just say that she didn't do Christmas? What the heck did that mean? And why was she so pretty? Percy's mind was swirling. It was stuck somewhere between knocking on the door to ask her more questions, knocking on the door to pretend he was a smooth and cool guy to ask her out, or not bothering her with the pestering questions. Ultimately, Percy chose the last option, much to his subconscious's dismay. He could almost hear that inner voice going, break down that door and stare at her until you figure out her eye color and then kiss her. But that would be many times fast, crazy, and creepy. So he went back to his own apartment and sent out a text to their floor group chat to meet up at his apartment in 3 hours. Okay, so not that I'm not grateful for these cookies, but what are we doing here? Leo said, stuffing a bright blue cookie into his mouth. Piper scolded him for getting crumbs onto the rug. Percy rolled his eyes and made a mental note to wash that rug. Though, he probably wouldn't remember to do so in like 30 minutes. Yet his memory, not the greatest thing in the world. I rounded you guys up because, have you met our new neighbor? He asked. Most everyone shook their heads. Piper was the only odd one out. I have, she said, raising a hand. Percy rolled his eyes at her. Wow, we didn't know that, he said with a playful but sarcastic voice. Piper winked at him in response. Well, I met her this morning, Percy started, only to be cut off by Piper choking. You, really? I'm surprised, Piper sputtered. Percy shrugged. Or kinda, at least. I asked her why her door wasn't decorated, and I told her about our tradition, and she says, I don't do Christmas, and then closed the door in my face, Percy explained. Piper snorted. Okay, yeah, that sounds a lot more like her. And yeah, she doesn't do the holidays, the brunette said, leaning back into her chair. Percy's green eyes nearly popped out of his face. How could someone just not do holidays? It was one thing to hear it from his neighbor while she was clearly stressed and busy and tired of him standing there for longer than welcomed, but it was another to hear Piper confirm it and do so nonchalantly. Why? He asked. Piper bit her lip and drew in a breath. I mean, it's kind of private, and, I doubt she'd like me telling practical strangers personal stuff, Piper said, looking off into the distance, probably to her friend's apartment. Ah, come on, we're trustworthy, Leo prodded with a smirk that meant he was totally joking. Piper smacked him upside the head. No, she said flatly. Leo then proceeded to whine like a baby, even as he got up and collected his coat to head back to work. I gotta go too. Love you, babe, Jason said, pressing a kiss to Piper's cheek. She nodded and waved off Grover, Jason, and Leo. Then she turned back to Percy, who had a grin on his face. Now you're stuck with me, he said with glee. Piper pretended to groan dramatically. Percy cleaned up his counter and covered the cookie platter. By the way, what is her name? She never told me, though I don't really think she wanted to talk to me, Percy said. Piper snickered. Okay, yeah, that sounds like her. Her name's Annabeth. And she doesn't like overly friendly people impeding on her life, Piper said. Percy hummed. Annabeth. Strangely, that name really fit her. That's unfortunate. But I think I already discovered that, Percy stated mindlessly, thinking of her expression when opening the door to a stranger that wanted nothing more than to talk about the holidays. Piper sighed, a huge change of demeanor. Yep, it takes a lot to get her to warm up to you, but I promise when she does, it's worth it. I actually think she'd be your type, or at least good for you. Maybe she'd give you some sense of organization, or maybe you'd be good for her. Piper looked around his apartment. There were boxes of decorations he had yet to put up and a half-set-up Christmas tree. Percy stuck his tongue out at her. Whatever, he said, not wanting to admit that he really wanted to know if he was her type, not the other way around. She looked at him with serious eyes, a rather rare look for Piper McLean, the girl who had once convinced 4 strangers at a bar to strip down in a subway station, though admittedly she was really drunk too at that time. Look, I'll tell you this because I know you've already met her, and this might be good for you to know, she said. The tone in which she had said this made Percy lean in and drop his goofy act and put on a matching rare serious expression. Piper sighed again. Holidays for her have always been horrible. All her life. Christmas had brought more pain than gifts. She has good reason to want nothing to do with it, okay? Percy gaped at her. But Christmas was all he could say. Christmas is a time of love and magic and fun. Piper gave him a wire smile. For you, not her. With that one sentence, there was a plan in Percy Jackson's mind. A promise, in fact. He was going to give Annabeth a reason to love the holidays. He was going to make sure of it. So are you into her or something? Because you know I can guess these things, Piper then said with a smirk. Percy groaned.